rolls with bacon bits. But okay, so I wanted to talk to everybody about the state seal of civic engagement. In my world, civics is something that is very important to history, social science educators. It's not always important to educators teaching other academic areas and at the elementary level. And I'm hoping that in the next 15 minutes, this will be sort of like your motivation and excitement to contribute in some way to this state seal of civic engagement. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what it is. Okay, so to kind of get our brains in that area, I wanted you to think about what it means to you to be civically engaged. So just take a minute and either in the chat via text, or you can unmute, but wait a minute. I want you to think about what this question means to you. So what does it mean to be civically engaged? And if you can either put it in the chat or text a friend, and then wait 1 minute and I'll have some people unmute. Okay, if you'd like to unmute and share something that either you saw in the chat or that you really think is important with regard to civic engagement, just tell us your name and your title before you tell us what your thinking is.
Well, I'll get it started since it's quiet. I'm Jonathan, everyone. And I'm just going to point out that as I'm looking at the comments, I'm noticing the word community a lot, about building a community, changing a community, something about community. So that's my observation.
Nice. And I think that it's really important to highlight that term community because a lot of times teachers are teaching in areas where they don't live. And so sometimes being able to learn about where your students reside and helping them kind of learn about their own communities is very important to just making their lives better and more engaged and connected.
I'll second what Jonathan said. I did notice the word community a lot. Sorry, this is Bernadette from the STEM Early Learning.
Bernadette.
Hi. And I think how we encourage people to be civically engaged is find something that they're passionate at. Me, like I think if I wanted to help the community, I would probably automatically like say I want to volunteer to help homeless veterans just because my dad was a veteran. So I think finding something that you're passionate about can help narrow down something you really want to help your community with.
Awesome. So make sure you take some time and read what people wrote in the chat. There's some great ideas. I think that in addition to these passion projects and really considering your own space, your own community, it's being able to talk about what's going on in our lives. And that's sometimes very challenging. And I think for all of us, we've had some interesting experiences in the last year and a half. With just being able to share what our own beliefs are and reasoning with our family and our community members. So that's really a big part of being civically engaged, that communication piece. So in 2020, this year, in September, the State Board of Education adopted criteria and guidance to award students the State Seal of Civic Engagement. And basically, this was to demonstrate knowledge of the U.S. and California Constitution, but also show that students were able to participate in our society and community. So students who are eligible to get this seal are 11th and 12th graders, and it'll basically be a diploma insignia. So for most students, it will travel with them once they earn it on their transcript, and then it will be part of their diploma. The reason why it's 11th and 12th grade students is because a lot of times we want to make sure that our 11th graders can apply something like this to applications for work and other college opportunities. The way that it's going to work is that local area agencies, school districts, are going to adopt their own criteria, and they're going to do so with state seal criteria that was identified by the state. Now, that being said, OCDE is hoping to support students at the elementary and intermediate level to earn a certificate that shows that they're on the pathway to this seal in addition. So there's going to be some sort of parallel work similar to the state seal for biliteracy. So let's just take a minute and look at the criteria to earn the state seal. Okay, so there are 5 criteria that districts are going to use to identify students who earn a state seal. And the first 2 are pretty straightforward in as much as those are likely going to be proficiency in grade level work. For most districts, being engaged in academic work in a productive way is going to be proficiency in U.S. history and government, because there's some verbiage in the state seal about having knowledge about the U.S. Constitution and the ways in which the government works. Vanessa wrote, being able to even know like how to pass a law, being able to know how our systems work. So does that mean that students have to get an A or a B? And the answer is no, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. We want this to be sort of a equitable insignia. It's not supposed to be a gatekeeper. We want every student who possibly can get access to civics, get access. So the first 1 and 2 are going to be this sort of, did the students pass their history, social science content? Now, here's the fun part, and this is where I think that you all can participate and you all can contribute to some of the content. So the next piece is participate in a civic engagement project. A civic engagement project could be a lot of different things. It could be something that goes on in one class, in multiple classes, across grade levels. So I want you to really think about what civics looks like, and it could even be beyond the classroom, right? So if you look at, what courses or clubs, and even long-term actions in the community. The last 2 pieces are even trickier, and in some ways they can be easy to measure, but there's a lot of subjectivity there. So what does it mean to demonstrate civic skills, right? So how do you assess students' ability to engage in civic discourse? And then the last piece is, what are those character traits? And so thinking through, like, even what does a citizenship grade mean? I know that for a lot of us, that has sort of been a nebulous assessment piece. That's something that we can think through as a team, much beyond history, social science. So when we think of the vision for the state seal of civic engagement, it's equitable and accessible. Districts are not going to be saying that students have to get an A or a B in a certain class. They're going to be saying you have to pass a class. You have to have exposure to. You have to have engaged in a project, but maybe just passed that project, had participation in. It's supposed to be nonpartisan. So think policymaking and betterment of your community rather than, oh, I'm going to engage in young Republicans or young Democrats. Think about what it is that I can do that might be really important and impactful, but it's not necessarily formal government. It could be a lot of different things. It needs to be systematic. So I think that something that we're trying to help districts think about is, how do we get schools to utilize their PLC time and their department chair time to kind of think through their leadership team time to think through what they want civics to look like at their site and in their districts. The other thing to think about is that it's really big. Civics can happen anywhere, right? When we think about what do high school and secondary students do, a lot of time on their phone, and that time on their phone is not at school. So virtually can be a place for civics. thinking about, you know, all the different ways that our students learned in this last year and a half is a way to think about civics. And then I've already talked about multidisciplinary, but most important, it's whole child and supportive of the community. So we want to make sure that we're thinking through ways to get all students, students who are multilingual, students who have disabilities, all of our students engaged in civics in the ways in which are appropriate for their context, and making sure that we help connect them with community resources where they can make a difference. So I have a lot of brainstorming here, but what I wanted to do is give us some time to think about where civics fits in the work that you do. So I gave a lot of examples, but when I think of civics, the big buckets are systems for implementation, inquiry, research, communication, and that community engagement piece. And a lot of us talked about that communication and that community engagement piece, but we don't want students to engage on an issue they actually don't know anything about. There's a lot of that in our political sphere right now. So we want students to be guided by teachers and by experts to understand their world. So we want to engage them in inquiry aligned instruction that aligns with their NGSS or their history social science framework or their common core standards in literacy and math or health. We want them to engage in this aligned curriculum and then do some research and then be able to communicate what they learned. And once they're ready to communicate what they learned, then they need to kind of think about where they're going to engage their community. So I wrote a lot of different ideas here, but I want to spend some time, and you're welcome to reference this slide as you're thinking. I wanted to spend some time thinking through the ways that your work supports teacher facilitation and student development of questioning, research, discussion, and community engagement. So I have a couple of options. I'm hoping that people use the Padlet so then we can kind of go back to it as a resource, but if you don't feel comfortable with the Padlet, that's okay too. Holly just copied it into the chat. What I'd like you to do is either reference this slide or just reference what you're thinking about and go to this Padlet and add some ideas. So for instance, I started it, I put the history social science framework includes short-term and long-term questions that can be used to guide civic learning. Another piece for discussion might be you know, engaging students in number talks. That could be a way to get students to engage in civics because they have to show their reasoning for coming up to a solution to a problem. So could we, in some civic learning, professional learning series, have a specific content expert in STEM come in and talk through those processes in a way that could connect to civics? So I'm going to give you about 3 to 4 minutes to add some ideas to this Padlet. Okay, so I see lots of people writing on that Padlet. So as you have some ideas, feel free to drop them there. Right now, I have planned a civic learning partnership set of meetings, series of meetings for next year. And then I am partnering with Anaheim Union, who has a wall-to-wall system for civics. And when I say wall-to-wall, all content area teachers are trained on civic engagement, and many of their schools have been, the super majority of their schools have earned democracy school status. So we're going to be partnering on a training that will be like a 6-session series, and then I'm hoping to do a deeper dive with PBL and some of you as partners. So our next steps are really to start thinking through ways that we can build civics education into what we already do in our professional learning communities and professional learning settings. Thinking about connecting with me if you're interested in doing some of that deeper dive training, and then developing curriculum and projects that embed civics in your work. And then I put a whole bunch of resources here. I have my webpage has quite a few resources just on civics, but then if you want to just kind of get updated